Oh, look at that, wow. Did you see that? Right, let's get started. The beauty of this approach, it's so simple. If you've got a short pole or even a whip, you're absolutely good to go with this style of fishing. So all we're going to be doing is basically getting the fish competing down the near slope. So nice and close to us so they're really easy to catch. Now, we could just chuck some bait in and start fishing, but to get the fish there quicker and get them competing, what we're going to do today is introduce a little bit of this stuff. The squeeze ready ground bait here. What I like about this, it's ready to go straight from the pack, so no need to mix it up. We can literally put it in and start fishing. If you've got one of these, a cupping kit, absolutely brilliant. That makes life really simple. If not, don't worry, you can actually make this into a little nugget and just throw it in behind your float. It'll do the same job. So I'm just going to put a little bit in a tub. You don't even need a full bag to kickstart the peg. I've probably used just about half a bag in total. I'm going to put a few loose offerings, just a few maggots, which obviously go in the ground bait, and these just help to give the fish a taste, I always think, of what we're going to be catching them on later. So I'm actually going to put this in loose here, so I'm just going to half fill that pole pot with that ground bait mix. As I say, if you haven't got a cupping kit, don't worry about it. Literally make yourself a little nugget, squeeze it a couple of times, and you can throw that at the backside of your float. Now, I say the backside, and that's really important. The biggest mistake I see anglers make with this sort of fishing is feeding past where they're actually going to be fishing. We need to be pulling the fish in towards us so they're nice and easy to catch. So we're just going to go about 5 metres out, and I'm actually going to feed this ground bait, and you can see where I'm holding the pole here. I'm going to feed this ground bait about a foot short of the end of the section. What I want to do is put the bait higher up the slope, so these fish have got to come past my bait to get to it. So I'm just going to put that in there, and I'm actually going to spread it over a little bit of an area look. Now the nice thing with that squeeze ready, it sinks straight down in the water, so that's going down to the bottom and creating a nice carpet of bait where I can fish. So if you are going to throw your bait by hand, just double check it's allowed. Some venues are very strict about it, but saying it is, all we do is we go out to, again, roughly where we're going to fish on the pole. And then I'm just going to plop this ground bait about a foot to 18 inches short of the float. And again, the thinking there is that bait is now settling just this near side of where I'm actually fishing. So I'm dead happy with that. And you can chuck as many or as few of them in as you want. But my guide is always a little bit just to kickstart your peg. So 1 or 2 pots like we've put in there, or 1 or 2 nuggets of ground bait. And then we're ready to start fishing. So the key to making the most out of this sort of approach is how you feed. And key thing, the biggest thing anglers get wrong is regularity of feed. So just because we've thrown some bait in now, that doesn't mean we're going to sit on our hands and basically expect the fish to come to us and we'll catch all day. That's not how it works. The fish that we're targeting on this method, things like roach, skimmers, hybrids, they're aggressive feeders at this time of year. They're trying to build up for the spring and then the summer. So in order to get them into the peg, what we're going to start doing straight away is loose feeding, little and often. And the beauty of doing it nice and close like we have today at 5 metres, we can actually feed by hand. We don't even need a catapult. So I'm just going to get 4 or 5 maggots. Hey, up where to bite them straight away. I don't know if you saw that. Little fish on. Hopefully they get a little bigger than this through the day, but it shows how they've come straight into that initial ground bait. And as we start feeding now, I think the fishing will get even better. So we've had that bite straight away. I think the fish are going to get a little bit bigger as the day goes on. But the key, as with all kinds of fishing, the key to getting the most from the peg today is going to be regularity of feeding and getting the fish competing. So throwing in maggots by hand. As you can see, the bait's landing just near the side of the float, which I'm always happy with. As I said, this sort of fishing, we're trying to bring the fish to us. What I don't want to be doing today, that's another bite straight away. And that looks like a little bit of a better stamp fish. What we really don't want to be doing today is, as I said, chucking bait in and it going right out into the lake, because if you do that, the fish simply aren't going to want to come into you and settle where you're feeding. So let's see what this is. But that was a fast bite, that. Oh, it's a lovely big roach, look at that. Straight away, so you can see how instant that's been. Literally, we've fed that ground bait, we've started loose feeding the maggots, and straight away we're into quality silvers. That's a lovely roach. And that maggot, the hungry. That's taken that bait right down. So you do need, one thing I'd always urge you to carry if you're coming to do this sort of fishing is a disgorger, because they can feed very, very aggressively. Now we'll run through what tackle we're using a little bit later. But for now, I just want to stress the two most important things with this style of fishing. If you were fishing for, say, a carp today, and we were big fish fishing with big baits, it would be much more about sitting and waiting and being patient and maybe setting a trap, like feeding a volume of bait and waiting for the fish to turn up. But this sort of fishing isn't like that at all. What we're doing here is basically trying to get those fish competing. So we're fishing a single maggot on the hook just to mimic the bait that we're feeding. We're laying our rig out so it falls through the water, and most importantly of all, we're very, very regularly throwing bait around the float, because what that does is it pulls fresh fish in all the time. The maggots that we're feeding there, now you can imagine these baits are getting eaten by every sort of species that's there. You name me a species of fish that doesn't want to eat a maggot. They all absolutely love them. So for that reason, we can afford to be very aggressive with how we feed them. And now we know there's some fish there, now we know that the fish are active and competing for the bait, we can be even more aggressive. Now, I'm throwing in probably about 30 maggots every put in. It's only going to be a short session here today, so I've probably got about a pint and a half of bait with me. Not too much. But listen, you can eke it out if you want to. If you've only got a bit of bait, it's more important to feed regularly than a lot of volume. So don't worry too much. Look, that one's come off. And I always expect the swim to take a little while to build up. Obviously that ground bait's good, it's brought fishing straight away. But it does always take a little while to settle in to your day, as I always call it. So that's a nice bite there, a little bit quicker. So that's another fish. You see how that bite came just as that float was, I always call it trimming up or settling up. And that's a nice size roach, probably 4 or 5 ounces. Look at that. Gorgeous fish. And you always know you've got your rig about right and your feeding about right when you're hooking the fish in the lips. What we don't really want to be doing today with this style of fishing is using that disgorger too much. I'll come on to disgorgers in a minute. It's important you bring one with you with this style of fishing, because every now and then you will find you have a fish that's hooked a bit further down the throat. But generally speaking, if you can get your setup right, you'll find that you hook them in the lips. That wind's just getting up a little bit now, which is making feeding a bit tricky. You'll see how a few maggots there landed just past the pole tip. I don't like that, so we're trying to avoid that generally. Another tiny fish. As I said, don't worry too much if you get small fish at the start of the session. Once the bigger fish find the bait, those small fish will get less and less, and I would hope the stamp of fish will improve, depending on, of course, on what's in the lake. And it's my first visit today here. It's a lovely little venue, not too far from Pocklington, between York and Beverley. It's a lovely little place called Lakeside Caravan Park. We don't know what's in here, but this method is a brilliant way of finding out, because, as I said, it's attractive to all species of fish. We're just going to get through these little fish, don't worry too much. If you imagine, what I always think happens is when you start a session and you start feeding fresh bait into a peg, the smallest fish will find it first. But then, as with all things in nature, what happens is the bigger fish will come in, or we call them the predators, or I don't know, just fish that are slightly higher up the food chain. And as the bigger ones come in, they bully the small ones out. It's always the case. So, as I said, I'm never too concerned. I'd much rather have them small fish here be getting bites, because that means that all the bait's getting eaten and we know we can carry on feeding aggressively. And look, that's another, not much bigger, but it's a slightly better roach. If in doubt, always net fish. I mean, this one's only sort of 4 ounce, so I can comfortably swing him into hand. And when you do swing it in, just try and grab it against your body. There's nothing worse. I see anglers trying to grab fish mid-air, and that's always a little bit risky for the fish. Now, I mentioned carrying a disgorger. We actually need it this time. I keep mine just in my drawer in a little tray here at the top. And this one's just took that bait slightly down its throat. So all we do, using the disgorger, is put it in the groove of the line, push it down, and the hook comes out. That's another lovely little roach in the net. a lovely, nice, chunky rudd, lively rudd. Had a few of these now. I'm just going to run you through the rig and how it's set up. Now, nothing too complicated. I'm just going to hook it up to the end of the top kit, make it easier to show you. So we'll start at the elastic end. Now, with a pole elastic, when you're pole fishing, you want something quite soft, because when you're hooking these small silverfish, the elastic needs to come out and basically cushion that strike. And so you can get what we call a balanced setup to land fish of all sizes. So it's just like a number 6 to 8 elastic. This is a light hollow elastic. Between the pole tip and the float, we've got a line of about 14, 16 inches, that one. But to be honest, you can get away with longer if the wind's different. Say the wind's off your back, a long line can be really nice because you can actually flick that rig right out past your pole. But today we've got the wind in our face, so we need that fairly short. We've just got a little back shot on there to stabilise things. Now, float choice and float size. This is probably the most important part of the rig, really. You'll notice that's quite a slim pole float pattern there, sort of nice and elongated as we call it. Carbon stem and a little fine bristle. And what that enables us to do is create this nice slow fall of the bait through the water when we can read the bites, which is why we've got a strung out shotting pattern on here. Because that basically, as you can see from the float footage, that basically enables the float to cock, and as it turns over you can read those dropper shot falling through the water. In terms of diameters, the main line is about £4, it's about 0.13, and it's actually reflow power line that David Preston invented back in the day. Hook lengths are finer, diameter, this is just under £2 actually, it's about 112. But as long as you've got that light elastic, the whole setup's balanced, and I'd happily probably land a carp on this today without too much sweat at all, as long as the whole setup works together. As I said, just under £2 that hook length, that's 0.9 power line, and the hook pattern is actually a Guru F1 pellet. Moving on to the bait, as I said, really nice and simple. Some red maggots here today, and my trademark over the last few months in all my match fishing and everything I've been doing has been the red Sensate powder. You can see it on my hands. I've added a good dollop of this to those maggots for extra attraction. I'm so sure this stuff gets you faster bites and often bigger fish as well. So I mentioned at the start how I was only hooking one maggot, and that's always a good way to start because I think it perfectly mimics the bait you're feeding. Obviously we're loose feeding regularly with small amounts of bait, but I'm just going to show you a little trick in a second about how I've been sorting out a few better fish these last few minutes. So single maggot, I'm hoping the fish will play ball and prove me right. So I'd expect on this a smaller stamp fish than when I do this next little trick that I'm going to show you in a second. Missed a little bite there. You will miss the odd bite with this. Don't worry if you do. Lay your rig back in. It's all part of it. There'll be fish darting about at all layers of the water out there. So that's why we're sort of working those levels. And yeah, look at that. That's a small-ish roach. Now, I've worked out a bit of a way of catching some slightly better fish, and it's dead simple. So always start on single baits because it lets you catch what's there and just gauge the stamp of fish in your peg. But if you do start having problems with too many small fish and you want to sort out a better one, just try this. So what I'm going to do now is put 2 maggots on the hook. The first one I'm going to hook through the thin end, and the second one I'm going to hook through the thick end. And the reason for that, they sit nicer on the hook if you do it like that, I always think. Double red maggot on the hook now. It's a good way, this, of sorting out some better fish. So I'm going to feed some bait before we go out this time. And then I'm going to put that double bait just again to the back edge of that feed. Just see if that sorts out a better fish. It often does. So just using that back shot to hold on to the float and create that nice slow fall through the water. That's got down to the bottom now. Let's just see if it works. It's worked 3 or 4 times quite nicely up to now today, so it's a little trick. And the beauty of it, of course, if it doesn't go under on this, you can soon come in and go back to a single maggot and carry on catching the small stamp fish. The main thing is, oh, there we are, that's a bite. And yeah, look at that, that's a better fish, that, on a double maggot. Oh, look at that, wow. Did you see that? That's pike's just eating that roach. Wow. I didn't even know there were any pike in here. Shall we see if we can land him? I don't know whether we will. I don't know any pike in here. Well, it's not bolted off, so we've got a chance. A chance of a big scissors for the camera. Let's just see. We need a bit of luck to land this. It all depends on where the pike's grabbed the roach. If the pike's grabbed it on the fish rather than near the hook length, we've got half a chance of landing it. Unfortunately, those teeth on pike are often sharp, so if it is grabbed anywhere near the line, unfortunately, there's a chance we'll lose the hook length. That often happens as well. That's a better stamp fish we've actually got on there. And that's often when the pike do strike, when you've got some bigger ones. I never knew there were any of them in here. Yeah, he might have woken up a bit now. He might not be too happy with us. Just goes to show, I love coming to new places. Full of surprises. Nearly jumped out my skin when that took that. Just goes to show, if you're coming here on holiday or for a weekend away, you might want to put a pike rod in. Let's see if we can get him. Slim chance, I'm saying, folks. We'll do our best for you. Sometimes you get lucky as well in a match. Most of the time, pike don't count, and what you're hoping for is see that roach jump out the way of it. What you're hoping for in a match situation is that the pike drops the fish, and then sometimes at least you've got something you can weigh in. Because most matches, unfortunately, pike don't count. But as we're only pleasuring today, it'd be nice to land him. You see what I mean about this balanced setup? I'm giving this fish, oh no, I think that's probably just bit through the hook length. Unfortunately, yeah, it has. Look, you can see where it's broke. I'm not too bothered. I mean, it'd be nice to land him, but you can't really expect to land great big scissor-mouthed pike on this gear. Now, double maggot's a brilliant way of sorting out better fish. So I might wait a little bit longer for a bite, although in that instance I didn't. You see straight away the stamp of fish has increased. So I'm going to try and see if I can show you the difference over the next 2 or 3 casts. But this is a good size roach. It's probably 4 ounce. I've mislabelled him. I've misidentified him. I think he's a rudd. Can't be doing that these days. There we are. Nice sort of 4 ounce rudd. And that was on double maggot. So let's put single maggot on. And if it's anything like it has been, what I think will happen on single maggot is we'll catch a smaller fish. So this isn't always the case. It all depends on what stamp of fish are in front of you. Today, it's a real mixture, which is lovely because it guarantees regular bites. It means you can mess about with things to catch a better stamp fish. So we've laid that in, feeding some bait as we have been, following it down. Let's just see. And obviously you catch the odd better fish on single maggot as well. We have been doing, but double just seems a bit more consistent in terms of sorting out them better ones. Let's see what stamp of fish we catch this time on a single maggot. It's not gone under, so as I said, what we do is we lift it out and we lay it in again. Keep searching through the column, and if it doesn't go under this time, we'll feed again as well. So lovely. What I love about it, on these cooler spring days like today, it's a really active way of fishing as well. We're constantly working. So that's just getting down to the bottom now. Oh, little dink on the float. Come on. Oh, that's just being held up. Alan Scotthorne has a bit of a rule. There we are. And you'll see, yep, as predicted, on the single maggot, it's not a bad fish. It's definitely smaller than the last one, probably 2 or 3 ounces, that one. It's a little hybrid. Let's go back in. I think it's had it right down, that one, so let's grab this gorger. Let's actually put it on the side tray now, because we seem to be needing it a fair bit today. I was about to say, a good rule that I learnt off Alan Scotthorne, who's a 5 times world champion and one of the very best at this sort of style of fishing. When you're getting regular bites and trying to build a weight, it's very easy sometimes to get carried away and to strike far too quickly. So if in doubt, when your float goes under, if you find you're missing the odd bite, just count to 1 before you strike. And you'll nearly always find that means you hit the bite. So we're back on double. Let's see if we can increase that stamp of fish again. Going out, laying the rig in, feeding some bait near the side of the float, letting the bait just fall through that loose feed. That slim float, you can see that working there, that's just following that bait as it falls. And because it's quite a nice fine cane bristle on these Chiantis, you do get to see those lovely shy bites as well. So there we are. Oh, we bumped that one. You bump one, just come back and double check your hook. It's well worth getting into the habit of doing that. I see a lot of anglers who, slight little tangle around the end. I see a lot of anglers who miss a bite or bump a fish often, have the fish on and then off, and they go straight back in and sit there. And I just think I couldn't do that in good faith, that my bait's not damaged. I want to know that when I'm fishing, everything's how it should be. So I think it definitely pays in the long run to check your bait. So again, we've got double on this time. Let's see if it does sort out a better stamp fish. In terms of plumbing up and what you're looking for when you start the session, I just look for either a nice gradual part of the slope. I don't like fishing on too steep a slope. I want it to be fairly gradual. Or even better still, sometimes you can find a little flat, hard area to fish on. If you can find that, that's all the better, because that often you'll find bigger fish actually settle on that area. But when you're on a slope, I think, oh, that's a little bite there. And let's see, yes, again, you see, that is a slightly bigger fish. It's definitely been the pattern today, that double maggot. Let's see, we might even need the net for this one. I don't know what it is. Oh yeah, it's a bigger roach. That's on the double maggot. And that's probably a 4-ounce fish. Absolutely. A bit bigger actually. I'm going to give myself 6 ounce for that one. Only working 2s, by the way. We never catch a 5 ounce. It's 2, 4, 6 or 8 every time. So, as with all theories, I like to keep testing it, especially when I'm pleasure fishing. So, being a match angler primarily, I love sessions like this because it lets you just try things and work out little theories. So we're going to have one more little go with a single maggot, one more go with a double maggot, and then we're going to sign off. So we're back on a single. Let's see if the stamper fish is smaller. Feeding. Again, you'll notice that's one thing that I've never stopped doing right throughout this film. That feed's got to keep going in, because that is what pulls fresh fish in and gets your bites. And the whole rig is set up to present a falling bait in with loose feed. So there we are, it's a bite. Now, this isn't actually a bad stamp fish. This one might be the one that bucks the trend that we've found. I'm not complaining. Let's just see what it is. Oh, it's another nice roach. Slightly smaller, I'm going to say, than the last one, but still well worth having. And that one's on a single bait. Huh. Oh, this is a bigger fish. I've had such an enjoyable session. We've not... Wow, look at that. That's a proper big skimmer. Probably only been fishing about 2 hours, I'd say. And been quite literally a bite every single put in. Lots of little roach, some rudd. And now we've got, I'm actually going to call that a bream, folks. Actually, that is probably 3 pound, I reckon, maybe even a bit bigger. And the interesting thing is, this fish has come into the swim. I actually sensed it going a little bit quiet, and then it's took the bait. I mean, look at that. What a cracking fish. Just 5 metres, or 5 sections of pole from the bank. So, I'm going to try and catch you one more of those bigger fish. But to be honest, any fish will do on this tactic. It's the beauty of it catches everything. And I'm just going to run you through the key points to making it work that will hopefully see you have a similar day over the next few weeks. So first and foremost, it's choosing where to fish. Obviously, have a look on the internet, on Facebook, on some of the many fishing forums out there, you'll often find out places that are fishing well and see where it's producing. But another good sign, another good visual sign that you can use to find venues where this sort of tactic often works is places you can see fish topping very well with colour in the water. Like you can see here, it's got a nice sort of tinge to the water. If it was gin clear, I'd suspect we'd probably have to fish a little bit further out into the lake in order to catch as well as we're catching today. So anywhere where you can see some fish topping, or where you can see reports of good nets of small fish, where there's a little bit of colour in the water, you'll often find this tactic works really well. Obviously sit nice and comfortable. I mean, we could have walked around the other side of the lake today and had the wind off our back, but it's not been too bad here. You can see we are nice and comfortable here, and we're catching good fish really nice and regularly. The key really, I'd say, is in the feeding and the rig. So I've spoke already about that little and often feeding tactic that just keeps the bait falling through the water. Oh, that's a lovely big roach that time, look at that. A big bream and now a great big roach. That little and often feeding tactic that pulls fish into the peg. And you can see the beauty of it, it really does attract everything. In 2 puts there while we've been chatting, we've had a bream and a big roach. Oh, I've dropped that one back. So regular feeding and a rig to almost, how can I put it, mimic the fall of that loose feed. So it's got those strung out shots on it. It's got a slim profile of float that helps you just follow that bait as it falls through the water. Obviously hook baits to start with, always try and, I call it match the hatch. So I always think whatever you're feeding, you should look the fish on the hook. So obviously today, ground bait and maggots. I'm fishing a single maggot on the hook, all we did to start with, and now to sort out those better fish, we're fishing 2 red maggots. So that's a really nice way of being a bit more selective. Give your peg a kick start by introducing just a ball or a loose pot, as we have done today, of the squeeze ready ground bait, because there's sensate attractant in there and it really does pull fish in nice and fast. This is a really lively one, this one. It went absolutely mad when we hooked it. Let's see what this is. Yeah, it's another nice size roach. And lastly, and perhaps most importantly with this sort of fishing, be active. There's no place in this tactic for sitting for any more than, I'm going to say, even a minute and waiting for a bite. What we're trying to do is feed regularly, pull fresh fish into the peg and catch them as the bait falls through the water. So keep yourself nice and busy. We're going to go out, I'll show you this one more time. Last fish of the day, lay the rig in, feed some bait all the time, we're nice and active, feeding the bait just near side of where we're fishing. And as I said, if this float settles and sits there for more than even a minute, I'd be looking to lift it out and relay it in. So we're getting it falling through the water again and just drifting past the eyes of those fish sat mid-water, intercepting those loose maggots that we're feeding by hand. It really is that simple, folks. Keep busy, keep active. We'll lay the rig in again. I'm going to feed again. We know there's fish there now, I'm feeding aggressively. If you do have a trickier session, if it is maybe not going to plan and things are a little bit harder, 2 things to try. First and foremost, feed less bait but more regularly. So still keep on with the regularity of the feed, every minute or so. Feed maybe a slightly smaller volume, slightly less bait in terms of quantity. So rud. But if that doesn't work, if it's a really tough day and you're not catching, and you're able to do so, if you've got more sections of pole or maybe even a waggler or a feeder rod, it might be the time to get further out into the lake where perhaps the fish are hanging back. But as we move into spring, to be honest, I think this is a brilliant tactic. It's one of my favourite ways of fishing, and hopefully you'll enjoy doing it as much as I have.